I'd just like to say thank you for coming, and I really appreciate all of you who decided to stay here, even though I would be saying a few words, so I really appreciate that. So, my name is Travis Foltz, and I've known Kris for 16 years now. We met when he and I were freshmen in high school, and I met Emmi shortly after high school when they began dating.
Wow.
So if there could be a thought bubble above Emmi's head right now, it would be saying, please, Travis, do not share an embarrassing high school story. And I won't be doing that. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody here today. Instead, I'd like to just make note of the fact of how beautiful Emmi looked today. She was floating magically and beautifully down the aisle.
Aww.
So I'd like to thank Emmi because she played a key role in my own wedding, and I'd like to return the favor here. So the wedding ceremony was absolutely beautiful, and I'm sure everybody was looking and thinking the exact same thing, was that, you know, Kris is such a lucky guy. Kris and I have been through a lot together. We've been through ball games, double dates, we've been on concerts, vacations, sporting events, etc. He's the first friend that I would look to and turn to if I ever got into a little bit of trouble. As guys, we don't often stop to talk about our emotions, but he's certainly the guy that I absolutely admire and I look up to above, you know, almost all of my friends, and he's somebody who's very, very near and dear to my heart. He's the most caring, hard-working, and the nicest guy that I absolutely know, and I'm doubly honored to be part of his most important day. It's ironic that Kris and Emmi attended the same high school, but never began dating in high school. They graduated high school, and I remember hearing about them the first time when they were both working at a place called Lucas Statuary, and basically Kris carried heavy things around the yard, and Emmi worked at the desk and interacted with customers. The thing was, is I recall Kris saying very early on that he would make special trips just inside Luca, just so that he could go and see Emmi.
Aww, that's so sweet.
The first time I remember all three of us being together is a testament to Emmi's patience, because we traveled all the way to Pullman, Washington to watch the Apple Cup, and Emmi sat in the back seat of Kris's small Hyundai, while Kris and I sat in the front seat and basically talked sports the whole time. But it was really a great thing, and it worked out. The thing is that from that point forward, there was definitely a change in Kris, and I could absolutely see that anytime he was around his friends, he was absolutely going to judge his actions as if Emmi was there and was cognizant of and they were attached to the hip certainly in the first beginning stages, but he never lost that real spark and love.
Wow.
So from an outside perspective, you could look at Kris and Emmi as certainly a portrait of opposites. As the cliche goes, opposites attract. I would prefer to say that rather than the cliche defining them, they've kind of set the cliche. And so if I could just use a little analogy here, Kris to me is a crisp Norwegian morning, and Emmi is a hot and humid Mediterranean evening. Kris is a fishing boat, and Emmi's an art museum. Emmi's the runway, and Kris is the raceway. The list could definitely go on, but it would be an error to exaggerate those differences too much, because at least on Kris's case, from the moment that he met Emmi, I think that Emmi brought out a side in him that I don't think he would have necessarily explored otherwise. And that's a side that is a sort of a curious, adventurous, and traveling side that I really saw come out in him. And then they're both incredibly tolerant individuals and caring individuals, and they're people that they're very, very easy to be around. They make everybody comfortable to be around. And as you can see at this wedding, they're both very, very detail-oriented. And so I don't work with them, but I'm sure their employers are absolutely enamored with their attention to detail. And they're both extremely clean individuals. If I had to, from my perspective, another point to point out is that, from my perspective, if I think of their marriage, in my case, I met my wife, and from the time that we met to the time that we got married was 2 years. In the case of Emmi and Kris, it's been quite some time. By my research, there's been 2 American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's been 2,500 new households in Ballard. There's been 5 different Seahawks starting quarterbacks, and the average temperature of the Earth has jumped more than a degree. For that reason, I think we can stand here at this particular wedding and we can be really, really happy about the fact they did everything in the reverse. They solidified the relationship, they established their career, they moved in together, they got their house and all those things. So this is simply, just icing on the cake. We're simply putting a stamp on something that has already been bonded. We don't need to leave this wedding wondering whether it will last a long time. So in closing, I'm in a bit of an odd position because I have been with my wife less than they've been together, so they should be the ones passing out a little bit of advice. But I'll try to, just from 5 years of marriage. First off, advice for Kris, I can tell you that the surefire way to remember your anniversary is to forget it just one time. I want to avoid that. The second thing, though, is that I think that once the honeymoon is over and all the regalia of your wedding is over, I think what you're left with is a very, very beautiful friendship, a friendship that will last your entire life. And I know personally from being their friends that this is a bond that they practice for a very, very long time, and they're very good at that bond. And so they just simply need to maintain that and realize that that's their best friend, that's who they were with for the rest of their life. So this is definitely all that a wedding should be. All people who love Emmi and Kris surround them here. They're a wonderful couple, and I hope that they're wonderfully happy, and I wish them all that they wish for themselves. And so please raise your glasses and toast a wonderful friendship built to last a lifetime.
That's what you're going to toast to the water glass.
That was a really good speech.
Hello, my name is Joey. For those of you who don't know me, I met Emmi through work about 4-ish years ago. She's an event planner and I'm a graphic designer, so I had the pleasure of designing for all of her events and making sure, to her standards, they were absolutely perfect. I have to admit, I did not write a speech for tonight because every time I sat down to write something, I realized there was nothing, good enough that I could say. I would sit down and write. Emmi is an inspiration to me. I admire everything about her. I admire her perfection. I admire her aesthetics. I admire her eccentuality. For what? Eccentricity. Sorry.
There you go.
I admire her integrity, her attention to detail, and her how genuine she is. And I kept writing, if I could aspire to be half as, there's not a word, there's just not one word that is explain my love for Emmy. She's absolutely perfect, and if I could aspire to be as perfect as she is, I would be a happy person.
Aww.
Emmy holds a place in my heart that cannot be filled by anybody else. And I miss her dearly since I left. Emmy's also so lucky to have Kris in her life. Just